Hey everyone, welcome to Cactus Embroidery. So these are the supplies you'll need to have. Here are some embroidery needles, as you can see, different sizes. You'll also need to have a pencil or colored pencil so that you can trace an image of a cactus. Don't use a pen. You'll need a pair of scissors to cut the thread, an embroidery hoop. They come in different sizes, but this is a smaller one since I'm going to be using a tea towel, so right on the corner. And you'll need embroidery floss. I have two different colors since I'm going to use them, as you'll see in a bit. And the last thing is some sort of fabric that you can use. It can be a cloth or linen. Here you'll see that I've splayed out the embroidery floss. The time they come in a bunch of 6, but it's very hard to tell. So you'll want to separate them and remove 3 that you're going to be using in this project for the outline of the cactus. Next, you will thread the 3 pieces of the floss into the hole of the embroidery needle, and in my opinion, that's the hardest part. Next, you will have a tail about the width of your hand length, as you see here. You want to hold it as such so that you don't lose the end of the floss, so that when you're using the embroidery needle, it doesn't get lost and then you have to start all over again. So I suggest wrapping your 3 fingers around like this. Now, you'll have to loosen the embroidery hoop when you buy it, so just twist it to the left. As you can see, it's kind of hard because I only have one hand, but once you loosen it up, you should be able to separate the hoops, and then you'll place your fabric in between. Next, you'll put a bottom hoop underneath your cloth that you're going to be working on, or linen or fabric, and you'll place the top part with the kind of loosening screw on top of your fabric. And you want to make sure that it is snug and that the fabric isn't loose. Here I'm just testing out to show that that's how snug I want it. I ended up moving it in the corner, as you can see, and once you have it placed in the position you want, you'll tighten the screw. So you'll tighten the top part towards the right or clockwise until the hoops can no longer separate. So as you see here, I'm making sure that I can't separate them, and we're ready to start. Just remember, if it's too tight, it will leave a mark in your linen, but that's okay. You can always just iron it out or wash it. So before we get started, this is the end with our needle, and our end of the string is here. So you want to make sure to make a knot at the very end. I suggest making a double knot. It's a little bit easier to do if you make a loop and then place the string through the hole twice. It makes it a little bit easier to form a double knot. And obviously once you make that, you can do it 3 times or however many times you want. But after you've done that, then you'll pull it tight and you'll get your knot. And that's going to help keep your embroidery floss secure as you're working with your design and fabric. And so there's the end. You want a little bit of a tail so that it's not going to come out of your hoop, and you also will end up cutting a little bit of it once you're done. So first off, you'll need your writing utensil. I have a mechanical pencil here, and I'm going to draw the outline of our cactus. So you want to make sure that you can see the design that you're going to be working on, but you don't want to make your outline too thick or too visible that you'll see the markings on your fabric once you're done. If you make it a little bit too dark, you can try to erase it once you're done, but you'll have to make sure as you're going, you're right on top of your lines so that you can't tell that you used a trace. Sometimes fabric stores also have tracing markers that you can use as well, and those are easily washable and disappear. So this is the type of cactus shape that I tried to get. Obviously it's a little bit different, but you can play around with it. However tall you want the arms of the cactus. Yeah. So you want to make sure that when you're doing this project, you always start from the back of your hoop, or the bottom. You'll place the needle through at the very end of the cactus. I like to work left to right, but it's your preference. So here you'll see there's the two endings, and I'm going to use my needle and try to find the best placement at the end of the cactus. So once you find that, you stick your needle through. Be careful, these are kind of sharp, so if you need help, ask for help. And there you'll see that end, that's about the width of your hand. You want to make sure that you don't lose that. Keep your 3 fingers tightly over that so that you don't end up pulling your thread out of your needle. And then you tug tightly and snugly, and there you go. So that's the end. So once we're done, you'll see and notice that I'll cut it off, but I just want to make sure that you see the tail and the knot. After you make the knot, you want to measure about ½ inch, maybe, or so. You don't want it too big, just because then sometimes the embroidered floss won't be that snug. But once you've kind of figured out a distance you're satisfied with, you'll pull the needle through from the top, as you can see there. And sometimes you'll get your floss tangled up, but don't fret. Just do it slowly and you'll get it like that. So once you pull it through, tug it a little snug, just to make sure that there isn't any extra loose ends that might make it difficult to work with. And there's our first stitch. So remember, going from the back or the bottom, whichever one you want to call it. So you'll take your needle and kind of do the same thing. You'll want to measure out a distance that's pretty similar to your first stitch, and you'll go up from the bottom of your embroidery hoop and follow your trace line as you did with your first one. So sometimes it's tricky. I kind of want it in the right place, but once you got it, you'll poke it through, and as you did the very first stitch you made, you will pull the needle out of your hoop and pull the thread through your embroidery hoop. So trying to get the perfect placement. Again, be careful with the tip of your needle because it is sharp. And there you see again the end that we put through the hole of the needle. And as I mentioned before, sometimes it gets tangled up, but just pull slowly and then try to straighten out the yarn if it's too bunched up in the back. And then again, you want to tug snugly. Now, the next part is what is called a back stitch. You want to place your needle at the hole of your first stitch. So here at the top of the hole of your first stitch, this is where you ended up putting your needle back down through the top. And so it's called a back stitch because you're going backwards. So once you find the hole of the stitch you finished, your first stitch, you're going to put your needle through there and you're going to pull. And as you see, I got a little tangled, so just making sure that it's all straightened out. And there you go, that's a back stitch. So there are a lot of different stitches, but this is kind of the basic stitch to start off with. When you're doing a pattern like a cactus, there are some curves, but as long as you just follow your tracing and follow the same kind of rules, then no matter what you end up doing, it will work out. So again, I placed the needle through the top of the stitch that I was working on previously, and pull. And I'm going to do that all the way through this outline of our cactus. So sometimes it can be a little tricky because you want to line up your needle right on your outline, but don't fret, you know, it's a work in progress, you know, it takes practice, especially if this is your first time. This is only my third time doing embroidery, but it's a really fun activity to do, and it's kind of cool because you get to make some really neat art that you can keep forever. Sometimes people like to embroider a piece of cloth and then hang it up on your wall. I'm using a tea towel, so once I'm done, you'll see at the very end, it's just a little embroidery at the corner of a tea towel that my family uses, and so it can also be used as a nice gift. So if someone has a birthday coming up, I know that Father's Day is coming up in June, you could make your dad or your grandpa or a friend an embroidery, and it's pretty neat. You can look on YouTube for different types of stitches, but in this video I'm mostly going to be using a back stitch and then an interrupted stitch that you'll see later on. So again, you put your needle through the top of the stitch that you previously just finished and you pull it through. And you'll do this all the way around your tracing. Now you can use whatever color you want. You don't have to use green. I used green because I had it on hand, but sometimes it's cool to use a different color. You can make your cactus orange, you can make your cactus purple. Some people like to do brown since it's a little different and using more softer tones. But realistically, you can do whatever color you like. If you want a blue cactus, go for it. Use your imagination. This is your project, and you can have fun with the colors that you choose. Now we're going to go down from the top. So again, you place your needle through the bottom of the hoop going upwards, and then you put your needle at the top of your previous stitch and then pull down. If you go on YouTube, there are a lot of different types of embroidery designs that you can use. If you go to a craft store, a lot of times they'll sell kits where they've traced an outline or a design already, and all you have to do is pick what type of embroidery floss you want and then go from there. There are more difficult stitches, but these are the basic stitches that you learn when you're making embroidery designs. Some of you might have parents or siblings, family members who do embroidery, and so if they have any tips or tricks, please feel free to use their suggestions and share. The best thing about arts and crafts is that Not only is it a fun way to relieve stress and it's a cool way to make a homemade gift, but it's also a great opportunity to share your knowledge and share what you know with other people. If you end up getting a little lazy, like I did, you can make the distance between your two stitches a little bit longer, especially if you're going up on a straight line. So again, you go through from the bottom, pull the floss, insert it at the top of the previous stitch, and pull through. Now the reason why I decided to do a cactus is because I really like the cactus in the desert, and you see them all around, all the saguaros, especially in Tucson. As you go to the top, you're going to be going around the corner or the curve, and so it can be a little tricky, but use smaller spacing between your stitches if you want a perfect curve. But I really like having some unique pointing tips to a cactus, so whatever you choose to do, I know it's going to look amazing. So once you turn the corner, you'll just continue with the same type of stitch that we've been using. The nice thing about this is, as you can see here, I'm just rounding the corner, but if you want it sharper or longer, no problem. Make it your own. With embroidery, the nice thing is that if you decide you need to take a break, as long as you have your design in mind and possibly had it traced on your cloth, then you can always come back. Just make sure that you know where your needle is, because you don't want to end up poking yourself or losing the needle completely. And as you can see, I just keep on going down. So I'm going to about there. The second arm of my cactus is a little bit higher up, but if you want it lower or higher, or you want to have 5 different types, it's totally up to you. It's totally fine. So we're almost halfway, a little over halfway done with this. I just made sure that I'm still keeping track of that end of my floss that I put through the embroidery needle, because if you lose track of that and you pull, you might end up pulling the thread all the way out of the needle, and then you'll have to take time to try to put it back through. Sometimes I think that's the hardest part, but some people have neat tricks. You can also buy needle threaders. I've never used one, but they sell them online. You can also get them from a craft store or Amazon. And so I'm turning the corner again. Once you've kind of made your corner, you can take a little bit bigger spaces between your stitches, but it's up to you. Now there's a curve there too, so I'm just going to space it out a little bit. It's not as curvy as maybe more professional people do it, but like I said, this is my third project, and as more times as you do it, the better you get. So, like sports, whatever you end up doing, the more you practice, the better you become. And then you can also share your talents and knowledge with other people. So, coming to the end of this tracing, again, remember to pull your needle with the thread so that it's a little snug. You want to make sure that when you pull it, you don't pull too hard that you end up breaking the floss or making a huge hole, but just snug enough. Now if you want, you can complete the bottom of it, but I like to keep it open. So once you've finished the outline, you're going to pull the needle through the hole and get rid of the string, or if you want, you can keep it on the needle, and it makes it a little bit easier to go underneath the embroidery floss to make your knot, since we're at the very end. So it's up to you. So here I'm going to place my needle underneath the stitches. I'm not poking it through, I'm just going right underneath the embroidery floss. And that way you keep it snug, and it's not too bunched up in the back. But once you make a loop, you can insert your needle through that hole and you'll get your knot that way. Some people like to make multiple knots. Some people like to thread the needle in 2 or 3 times before they tug it so that they have like a triple knot. It's really up to you. This is just to make sure that the floss is secure so that your design and all your hard work stays intact. Again, the end of your needle is pretty sharp. It's okay if you end up losing the hole like I just did. You know, you can just put it back through. It's going to make a little bit of a double loop, but it's okay. And you'll see later on, I ended up tying the ends of both my, the beginning and the end of my string together, but here I just decided to keep them separate. So once you have it snugged and secure, obviously there's the cactus, and you'll want to get your pair of scissors. You can ask a grown-up for help, but you want a pair of scissors that you can easily hold. So you see that my knot is pretty close to the cloth, so I'm just going to cut just right above so that there's a little bit of a tail, not too big. If you're worried about it unraveling, feel free to cut a longer tail. If you want, you can keep that tail that we first started with, but I'm going to cut mine a little short, just because I want to try to keep the back of it clean. So here's our front, and you saw the back. So now we're going to move on to the second part of this project. Now you'll want to get your other color. That's the green that I used for my cactus. You can use a darker green, a lighter green. In the middle, you can use a different color all the way completely. So we're going to make those lines in the middle of our cactus. I decided to choose a different color. Here you go. I love the color orange, so I decided to use this embroidery floss. And again, you're going to separate your string. Now here you see that I am using 2 pieces of thread, but you can make 3 or the whole thing. It's just easier for me to work with. And again, there's the knot. So don't forget your knot at the one end and enough tail where your needle is. So now I'm going to go up through the middle, just a little bit easier, just making sure that I have clean lines in the back. So you want to look at your stitches from your cactus and try to line up these inside stitches as best as you can. But if you want to start from the bottom, you want to start in the middle, it's totally up to you. It's all going to work out no matter what you do, and it's going to look great. So as you can see, pulled it through. There was my knot, and now we're going to move up. So here, just as we started in the very first stitch with the cactus, you go from the bottom to the top, and then you get a little bit of space, and you thread your floss through, and you put it tight. Now, instead of a back stitch, what we're going to do is an interrupted stitch. It might be called something else, I don't know, but that's what I call it. So you hold it like normal, and usually you would go from there to the top of the first stitch you made, right? when you're doing your back stitch. But here we're going to make it an interrupted stitch. So we're not going to go back. We're going to go forward. If it's easier, you can call it a forward stitch or interrupted. But the key is you're not going to go backwards to the top of the hole of your first stitch. So again, you want to come through the bottom, about equal distance between it, but it doesn't have to be perfect, and then you're going to go forward. Again, pull it through, tug it a little bit so it's nice and secure, and work your way up. Now when we get to the top, you can do it several different ways. I'll explain what I'm doing now, but if you want, you can always just continue doing this interrupted stitch, and it's not going to be a problem at all. So I finished the top of the stitch that I wanted. Now I'm going to the very top of my cactus. And now I'm going to do a back stitch because I want a very nice connected line. But you don't have to. So again, the back stitch is where you'll place your needle through the top hole of the stitch that you just finished. And you pull it in, and there you go. So that's the stitch that we used for the cactus. That's called the back stitch. Now I'm going to make my way down the cactus. I'm going to try to make it so that they line up. Here I'm going to do another back stitch, but like I said earlier, you don't have to do it. If you want, you can always just continue that interrupted stitch all the way throughout. But this is how I decided I wanted to do it, just to give it a little bit of a connection with the outline of the cactus. I see I go back to the last stitch that I made, and that is the last back stitch that I'm going to use for the inside of my cactus. So you can see here it's kind of a little tricky in the back, looks kind of messy, but it's okay. People are going to see the front. So as I'm going back down, I'm trying to place my needle at around the same space and same location as my other stitches that I went up. It's what I like to call parallel. So you want to try to make your stitches parallel to each other. I like to use a technique where I lightly use my needle in the back, and as you can see, it's moving to the position where I want it, and once I get it, I stop and I push my needle through. But you can do it however you like. If you want, you can also trace where you want the needle to go through. You know, the first time we did this with the outline of the cactus, we had a tracing, but here I'm kind of doing it more freehand. If you want, you can make dashes to where you want these lines to be, and you can follow that as your guide. So once we're to the bottom, again, you tug it so it's all connected, and then the next part is we're going to do the arms. Some people like to just continue on. If you want to just keep going so you don't have to worry about tying a knot, you can. And see here, I decided to tie the two ends together. So now I'm going to go through one of the holes I made previously, and this is just a way to make it look like I did it all in one go. So I'm coming from the back, and I'm going through one of the holes, and I'm going to go towards one of the arms or branches of a cactus. So again, you always go through from the back. If you go from the front, then it all gets jumbled and you end up sewing your embroidery hoop into your fabric. So always remember, go from the back. Now, like we did for the lines going up and down, we're going to do the same thing where we do an interrupted stitch. So again, you place your stitch, you pull it through, you go from the back, Sorry, I'm just making sure that you can all see. You go from the back, insert your needle, however big of a distance from your previous stitch, doesn't matter, you choose, and then you pull it through. And again, that's called an interrupted stitch, or you can call it a forward stitch. So when you get to the end of your cactus arm, you can either do the same thing that we did in the previous interrupted stitches, or you can just keep going on. So here, instead of going through the top and doing 2 back stitches, I'm just going to continue on with our interrupted stitch. So I went through like normal, and I'm going to come up right on the other side of this line that I made, or the stitch, and I'm going to keep going on with this interrupted stitch. Again, trying to place it so that they are parallel to each other, but doesn't have to be perfect. If you want them a little off center from each other, that's totally fine. If you want them big on one side and small on the other, that's cool too. Like I said, this is your project and you can design it however you see fit. So here I decided to go from the back, and instead of making a stitch, I'm just going to go underneath those middle lines. So I'm going to thread my needle ever so slightly underneath those stitches that we made previously. This way I can still work across to the other side of the arm and not have to worry about making a stitch and making it look a little too crowded. So once you've done that, you're going to start again and make your interrupted stitches. So I'm going to start from the top this time, top of the arm, and work my way down. So again, finding a place where you want to have these lines, and you'll poke your needle through and start your interrupted stitch. Remember to keep track of that end of your tail where you threaded it through the hole of the needle or the eye of the needle. You don't want to lose that, because if you do, then you're going to have to put your embroidery floss through the eye of the needle. And for me, that's the hardest part. So once I've gotten to the top, I'm going to continue with the interrupted stitch and work my way down. Some people like to use tea towels like I am. You can embroider hats. Some people like to embroider different types of fabric. I think some people like muslin. There's another fabric that people use when they do cross stitching, and it's a little trickier. It's not as soft and neat as just regular linen, in my opinion. But if you have that at home, and you can use whatever you decide you want to use. Be resourceful. You could use a pillowcase, you could use whatever you want. So once you've completed your other arm, you can either make more lines, make more dots, whatever you decide. You can do whatever you want to do. Here I'm just gonna go through the outline and connect it with my other one, so it kind of looks like a mirror image of that first stitch I made when I was starting on the arms. And there you go, there's your lines. And this is what the back looks like. So again, we're going to make some knots. Don't worry if you make your knot with a really long tail. We're going to cut the tail as we did with our cactus outline. But here I'm going to do that same technique where I take my needle and I go underneath to make a little hoop, like so. And then I'll make my little hoopity hoop. Right there. And then once I've got that hoop, I'm going to insert my needle through it. If you want, you can always start out with a bigger hoop, because once you put your needle through that circle, you're going to tug your needle eventually, and so it will become smaller. Just make sure that you still keep track of where your strings are and where the end is. So I'm going to make one. I'm going to put my needle through again before I tug it. Like I said, you can do it 2 times, 3 times, 5 times if you want it really tight. And then I'm going to do it one more time. I like the number 3. And so I'm going to tug it tightly. And I'm just going to push my knot down so that it touches the fabric. There you go. A little bit better in focus. And again, once I feel like I've got it secure, I'm going to take a pair of scissors and I'm going to cut the end. If you want, if you made it a little bit longer, you can always tie it to the other yarn, or the other end, but I like to keep them nice and short. So there you go. Here is our cactus. Like I said, you can use whatever colors you like. Once you're done, you can either keep it on this embroidery hoop if you have like a square cloth of fabric, but since it's a tea towel, I'm going to unscrew the fabric, or excuse me, I'm going to unscrew the hoop so that I can release my fabric. So once you get it loose enough, it will just pop off, and there you go. There is my cactus. I can't wait to hear and see what your guys' cactus looks like. You don't have to do a cactus, you could do a heart. Same idea. You can find different patterns online, and like I said, you have a little bit of an indent with a circle from the embroidery hoop, but usually that washes out, or you can iron it out if you really want to make sure that it looks straight and neat. And here's the final product, my tea towel and cactus. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and I can't wait to see your design. Have fun!